The stories featured in Greeking Out are original adaptations of classic Greek myths. This week's story features anger issues, villains, collaborations with corporate entities, centaurs, women with limited choices, major beef, and the inability to let things go.
Welcome back to Greeking Out. We are continuing on with our two-part series on Heracles in his wellness era.
You have reached the Oracle of Wifi's answering service. Please leave your name and question for the Oracle after the beep. Beep.
Okay, it seems the Oracle is also embracing her wellness era and is on vacation. I guess I forgot about that. How am I going to do this episode?
Hi. Hello. Yes, hello.
Oh, hello.
Oh, hi. I'm Stephen Carlile, a friend of the Oracle's. The Oracle told me to be here at this time for recording. She also left me all these pages of notes I'm not sure what to do with.
Okay, cool. The Oracle has arranged for another guest for us. All right, that's great. Stephen, I gotta say, you look really familiar.
Well, I'm playing Hades in the new West End musical version of Disney's Hercules in London.
Oh, I heard about that. That's one of the most popular versions of Heracles' story, though, you know, Hercules is his Roman name, right?
Yes, the Oracle has given me 3 pages on the origin of the name Heracles and its Roman counterpart. I'm up to speed, I assure you.
Good. Okay. So, they cast you as Hades. I guess you have to have some real villain vibes about you then.
Oh, no. Being cast as a villain doesn't mean you're a villain. It's actually fun to play someone so against my actual personality.
So what were you doing before the Hercules show opened?
Well, I also played Scar on the Broadway version of The Lion King for 8 years.
Yeah.
I'm actually rather a nice person. I really like baking shows.
Sure, okay. Well, either way, I'm glad you're here because we are moving from Heracles' wellness era to his villain era.
I listened to the last episode. Wasn't he just learning to control his anger with Queen Omphale?
Yeah, let's do a quick recap for the audience. So, Heracles wanted to marry Iole of Ocalia, and so he competed in an archery contest, which he won, but Iole's father refused to let Heracles marry her, so Heracles lost his temper and killed Iole's brother, and as punishment, Heracles was sent to the kingdom of Lydia to be a servant to the wise queen Omphale, and there he learned that though he is very strong, strength and destruction are not always the answer to his problems.
Well, that's right. What I found in my life is that anger only leads you down the wrong path.
Really? I would think you would be pro-anger as a motivating factor, given your general, villainness.
Again, those are just roles that I play. I'm actually my dog's favorite person.
Well, that is a really strong recommendation, and ultimately unverifiable, as the Oracle would say. Anyway, we're going to catch up with Heracles when he winds up in the kingdom of Calydon.
Calydon was a city in ancient Greece that appears in various myths. It was where the legendary hunt of the Caledonian boar took place.
Oh, right, I remember that. But at the moment, the land was free of boars and pigs of any kind. Allow me to paint a picture for you. Heracles was making his way through the busy streets, getting the occasional odd look from some of the merchants selling their wares in the marketplace. His intention was to make it to the palace to offer his services to King Oeneus. But then, he was almost run over by a chariot.
Out of the way, big fella!
A voice yelled from behind him. The townsfolk immediately stepped out of the street, as did Heracles, just in time to avoid being run over by a gilded chariot pulled by 2 powerful horses. The chariot skillfully navigated the narrow street, with the driver expertly turning to avoid any stray pedestrians who might still be in the way. Once the chariot had passed, the driver turned back and waved, and the crowd began to kneel, or at least bow their heads. The chariot driver was a beautiful woman, and, judging from the crowd's reaction, Heracles figured she must be royalty. She snapped the reins, and the chariot leapt into motion again, making its way through the town and up to the palace nearby. Heracles quickly followed.
This was the daughter of King Oeneus of Calydon, Deianira. Not many royal women were strong or brave enough to drive their own chariot. Now, the Oracle has written here that some people believe Dionysus to be her real father.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, she seems to be living her best life over there in Calydon. Now, while Heracles was initially going to Calydon hoping to offer his services to the king, he now started thinking about marriage again. Heracles was still kind of burnt up over not being allowed to marry Iole, if he was being honest, but he was trying to move on and looking for someone to settle down with.
Now, a fun fact that I happen to know is that Scotland was called Caledonia by the Romans, which is still a word used for Scotland today. It was named after the people who lived there at the time, the Caledoni. It probably has no connection to ancient Caledon, though Scotland occasionally does have a boar problem as well.
Wow, that's really interesting. I kind of thought the Oracle might have left you something about snakes, though.
Oh, she did. New Caledonian sea crays are venomous sea snakes endemic to the waters around the island of New Caledonia, which is east of Australia in the Pacific Ocean.
Wait, hold on. The snake can swim?
Actually, Oracle has left a lovely reference here to the study done on a diverse set of snakes. You know, snakes that live in trees, live underground, etc. And all of the snakes tested were able to swim. So it seems like a common ability.
Wait, you mean all snakes can swim?
Well, all snakes for which information is known. The scientific article, which came out in November 2024, says 525 species at least can swim. We don't know about the rest.
That's got to be an interesting job. Snake swimming tester. How do you feel about snakes, Stephen? Oracle? Storical?
Well, this feels a bit like a trick question, but I prefer puppies.
Yeah, sure you do. But we're getting off topic. This part is about Deianira of Caledon. Heracles saw the way she drove her chariot, and he wanted to marry her on the spot. Unfortunately, she was already engaged.
Her fiancé was the river god Hercules, which as far as fiancés go, sounds like a good catch.
Catch, yeah. Fish reference. Nice job, Storical. Yeah, the Hercules River is a long river in western Greece, and Hercules was kind of the personification of that river. If you can imagine how strong the rushing current of a river can be, you can imagine that this guy was a powerhouse.
Well, he was son of two titans, Oceanus and Tethys, and in some stories he is credited with being the father of the Sirens.
And this Hercules guy had a particularly cool power. He could change shape. Sometimes he looked like a dude, sometimes he looked like a bull, and sometimes he looked like a powerful water snake. He liked to mix and match, you know? Well, one look at this powerful sea god who can change into a bull or whatever, and the other suitors suddenly found something else to do with their lives. They were no longer interested in marrying Deianira, so she was stuck. And even though marrying a god is probably a step up in the world, Deianira didn't like bullies or people who use their strength to get their way. Unfortunately, her father had already made an agreement with the river god, and he wasn't about to back out on that and face the wrath of Hercules, so Deianira was stuck, and Heracles wanted to help.
Well, I'm sure Heracles had a nice civil discussion with the god, and they came to an agreement peacefully, as all disputes should be decided.
Nope, that is definitely not what happened. Heracles thought he would fix it by challenging the river god to a wrestling match. Whoever won the match would win the right to marry Deianira. The loser would respectfully bow out.
Well, as a devoted non-villain myself, I have to point out here that Deianira is still going to get no choice in who she marries.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this isn't out of the ordinary for women in ancient Greece. Deianira had few choices just in general. Heracles maybe thought of himself as the better option, although that's really up for debate, but either way, he was going to wrestle a god for the chance to marry her. The match itself was pretty dramatic. Heracles waded to the banks of the river and waited for Hercules to approach. The water seemed to swirl around and even inside the human form of the river god. As Heracles watched, Hercules grew taller and taller until Heracles' opponent was the size of a tree. Heracles couldn't wait any longer, and he lunged at Hercules. The river god swung a massive arm, and the mortal hero was knocked into the air, splashing into the water downstream. Again, Heracles ran at the river god, and again he was swatted away. But the third time he charged, Heracles ducked down at the last minute and dove underwater at the feet of the river god. Hercules toppled over easily and splashed down in the water. Heracles pounced immediately, hoping to pin the river god to the bottom, but without warning, the god himself was gone, and Heracles found himself trying to hold on to a powerful water snake.
The water moccasin, or cottonmouth, is a semi-aquatic venomous snake native to the southeastern United States. Its name comes from its defense display, where it shows the inside of its mouth, which is white, to intimidate predators.
Now, I think turning into an animal was Achilles' biggest mistake. It's almost impossible to fight a river, but Heracles was very experienced at fighting monstrous animals of all kinds. The Caledonian boar, the Stymphalian birds, he'd fought all manner of beastly creatures. Heracles managed to get a grip on the slippery serpent and heaved it out of the river and onto dry land. The river god changed form again and transformed into a ferocious bull. The giant bull roared, lowered its horns, and charged. Heracles was trying to regain his breath when he saw the sharp horns of the beast closing in on him. He didn't have time to think. He simply reacted. Heracles charged at the bull and grabbed one of the massive horns, pulling the bull's head to one side. The other horn slammed into the tree, and so as Heracles pulled, the horn in his hand snapped off, and Achilles howled in pain. And just like that, the fight was over. The river god slowly shapeshifted back into his normal form and staggered back into the river holding his forehead. And Heracles stood on the banks of the river holding a broken horn. In addition to his horn, Achilles also lost the contest to marry Deianira, and she quickly agreed to marry Heracles.
And they lived happily ever after, I'm assuming.
Well, considering we're only halfway through the episode, unfortunately, no. But what happened next was really amazing. They took a commercial break. Yeah. Okay, well, it's actually not that amazing, but it is something we have to do. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Greeking Out. Okay, back to the Greeking Out. Where were we? Things were pretty good for a while. Heracles and Deianira built a life together, and Heracles was finally able to settle down just like he always wanted. Except, well, he was still a little bit steamed about the whole Iole thing. And a lot of other things, actually. As he got older, Heracles started to dwell more on all the people that had stood in his way unnecessarily. People who had deliberately blocked him from achieving success. Right, Storacle? I mean, this kind of stuff is infuriating.
Well, actually, I find that life's challenges make me a better person. I try not to dwell on the negative.
Uh-huh. So, you've never plotted revenge on anyone who wronged you? Like a nephew, or maybe a different, fluffier, cat-like nephew?
Well, like I said, I only play villains on stage. When I'm not on stage, I take long walks with my dog and get stuff off the top shelf at the grocery store for little old ladies.
Okay, well, maybe I misjudged you, sorry. And Heracles' life from here on out is going to sound really foreign to you because it first starts with Heracles and his new wife Deianira fleeing her father's kingdom because Heracles, accidentally, maybe on purpose, kills the king's cupbearer in a rage.
Oh my, I thought we were past this, Heracles.
I know, right? But apparently not. And so Heracles and Deianira were on the road looking for a new place to live where Heracles hadn't already been exiled from. And that's when they came across a river too deep and strong to cross. Even Heracles, with all his strength, would have trouble crossing it, and he wouldn't be able to carry Deianira.
Heracles is once again confronted with a river he has to defeat.
"Hello there," came a voice from across the river. "Need help?" That's when a figure standing on the far bank appeared. It quickly jumped into the water and splashed merrily toward them, across the raging rapids. At first, he just seemed like a regular man, but as he got closer, the couple could tell that he was a centaur. Now, longtime listeners may know, Heracles and centaurs have a long history.
Yes, there is an alphabetized list here of Heracles-related centaur deaths labeled Major Beef.
Yeah, you can add centaurs to the list of things Heracles had major beef with. Rivers, centaurs, and Iole's dad. But as the centaur swam closer to them, Heracles was ready to strike. Deianira, though, stayed his hand.
"Maybe he just wants to help,"
she suggested. "Indeed I do, and I can," the centaur said, smiling. "My name is Nessus. I'd be happy to carry your wife across the river for you. That should free you up to concentrate on getting across safely yourself." Heracles' eyes narrowed as he fixed his angry gaze upon the centaur, and for a second, the centaur seemed to return that look with an angry glare of his own. But only for a split second. If you blinked, you'd miss it. and you'd simply see a warm smile plastered across the centaur's face. Heracles didn't trust the centaur at all, but Deianira insisted upon giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Thank you for your kind offer, Nessus.
Deianira replied.
I would be honored to be your passenger.
And with that, she hopped upon the centaur's back, and he laughed heartily as the two turned and headed back towards the other side of the river. Heracles himself started across the river when suddenly he realized that Nessus wasn't stopping on the other side of the river. The centaur kept going, galloping away with Heracles' wife.
Hey, wait!
Heracles sputtered.
Leave my Deianira alone! Come back here!
Heracles splashed and stomped and swam his way across the river as quickly as he could, but it was slow going, and the centaur was much faster. There was a meadow on the other side of the river, and the centaur was almost all the way across it. He was gripping Deianira by the waist as she struggled to get free.
This princess is far too good for the likes of you, Heracles,
Nessus shouted over his shoulder.
Nessus to the rescue! Ha ha!
That isn't a rescue!
Heracles shouted.
That is kidnapping!
Now, this is truly villain behavior.
Yeah, if you learn anything from Greeking Out, it should be that stealing people is wrong. Nessus had taken Deianira almost to the edge of the forest where he would surely be untouchable, so Heracles took out his bow. And even though Nessus was so far away, he managed to launch an arrow that caught Nessus just at the edge of the trees.
Heracles' arrows were famously poisoned with hydra venom, so even one arrow could take a centaur down.
Deianira, released from the centaur's grip, moved out of his reach, but before she could move further away, the centaur spoke.
He really doesn't love you, said Nessus. He's hung up on a past love.
Deianira stiffened at that. Everyone knew about Heracles and Iole and their failed courtship, but Deianira hadn't ever heard Heracles talk about Iole.
He literally wrestled a river god for me. I think he's proven his love,
Deianira said.
Well, if you are ever uncertain, said the centaur, my blood can be used in a love potion. Put it on his clothes, and he will be with you for the rest of his life.
That seems like a strange thing to say with one's last breath.
Indeed it was, but by the time Heracles got to Deianira, she had some of Nessus's blood in a perfume vial in her bag, and Heracles was none the wiser. Now, I don't know what happened to Heracles after that, but it's kind of like this encounter with Nessus set off Heracles' need for vengeance. Instead of staying home and enjoying his life with Deianira and their children, Heracles went off to seek revenge against those who'd wronged him. Unfortunately, Heracles seemed to have forgotten everything that Queen Omphale had taught him and terrorized many of his former enemies. The king who made him clean out his stables, some guy who cut off his chariot in traffic, everybody. Then, because he couldn't let it go, he sought to take revenge on Iole's father, King Eurytus of Ocalia. In fact, it wasn't just revenge. He raised an army to destroy the kingdom of Ocalia, didn't leave a single stone unturned. The campaign was brutal, and King Eurytus and all his sons were killed by Heracles and his armies.
Yikes! Oh, that's how the Greeks would have pronounced yikes.
Yikes is right. When Heracles finally captured Iole, she had lost her whole family along with her kingdom.
Are you happy now?
She asked him.
You proved my father right, you know.
What do you mean?
Heracles asked.
He said you were too angry, that you would never make a good partner in life because you can't control yourself and let go of anger. Well, congratulations. Look at what your anger has gotten you.
She gestured to the rubble that her kingdom had become. Heracles took it in a rare moment of introspection. Iole was not the first person to point this out to him, that his anger brought only destruction, but something about her words really hit home. Heracles realized that he had destroyed a place where he had found mentorship and learning in his younger years. He'd killed people he had considered friends. And over what? That they had correctly assessed that he couldn't deal with his own emotions? This was a lot for Heracles to think on, and it wasn't something he could really just fix, you know? The damage was done.
Well, I mean, that's letting him off the hook pretty quickly, don't you think? The damage is done doesn't mean he's not responsible for his actions.
You are so right, Steve Storacle. And that is a very non-villain thing to say, by the way. Heracles felt the responsibility to start fixing what he had done and finding another way to live. After all the revenge he'd taken, none of it made him feel any better.
Iole,
Heracles said.
I know it's not much, but let me make sure you have someone to take care of you.
From a modern perspective, it would seem like Iole would be a whole lot better off without Heracles' help, but in ancient Greece, Iole, as a royal woman without her family or her kingdom, was very much in danger.
I have a kind and trusted friend who has been looking for a wife,
Heracles continued.
He will take good care of you.
Again, by today's standards, this is not a great deal, but once again, Iole couldn't see other options for herself, so she agreed to go with Heracles.
This was a rough time for women, it seems.
Oh yeah, and given that, you can kind of understand what Deianira was going through at this point. While Heracles was off revenging, Deianira had been sitting home, waiting for him to come back, probably thinking about how she swapped one bully for another. And then she hears that he's coming back with Iole, his lost love. Who would blame her for thinking she was about to find herself without a husband and without protection? And all the while, the words of Nessus from way back when were swirling in her head. She got out the small perfume bottle of blood she'd carried with her all these years. Nessus had assured her that his blood could make a love potion, and she clearly remembered him saying that it had to touch Heracles' skin. So, as carefully as she could, Deianira found some clean clothing to lay out for Heracles when he got home, and dripped the blood inside the garment. When Heracles came home, of course, he put the clean clothes right on. The second the fabric of the shirt touched his skin, Heracles was seized with agony, and he began to burn. He ripped the shirt off quickly, but by then, the venom had already been absorbed through his skin. He felt like he was on fire.
Ah, the centaur's blood had hydra venom in it because of the arrows. I understand now.
That's right. Nessus had obviously tricked Deianira to get back at Heracles one last time. And of course, this hadn't been Deianira's intention. She loved her husband.
There was apparently a prophecy that said Heracles would be killed by an old enemy from beyond the grave, which he must not have paid a lot of attention to as he was running about killing his enemies.
Yeah, a common theme in Greek mythology is that you only realize the prophecy is true after the fact. And probably as Heracles was dying, he thought back on that prophecy and knew the truth of it. But because Heracles was a demigod, it took a long time for the venom to kill him, so he asked Deianira to build him a funeral pyre. That's a large stack of logs and wood that's set on fire. And he put himself right on it. Now, for a mortal man, this would surely kill him, but not Heracles.
Now, I have a note here that says his mortality was burned away.
Exactly. This is how Heracles finally becomes a god. He burns his mortality away on his own funeral pyre and ascends to Mount Olympus. There, he actually marries Hebe, the goddess of youth.
What about Deianira and Iole?
Well, Deianira made sure that Iole was taken care of, found her a caring husband that would protect her. And in some versions of the story, Deianira throws herself on Heracles' funeral pyre, but in others, she lives to a ripe old age, raising her children alongside Iole and her family.
And they all lived happily ever after, having learned their lessons about revenge.
Yeah, wow, that's great, Steve. Historical. We'll cut the episode right there on that great ending line. You know, I'm glad you came by, and I'm sorry about accusing you of being a villain. That was uncalled for.
No problem whatsoever. It happens all the time.
Well, I hope not, but anyway, listen, I got to go work on the rest of the season, but it was great talking to you. Thank you for filling in for the Oracle, and good luck with the show and everything.
Lovely to meet you. Goodbye.
You too. Take care.
Is he gone? I can't believe he fell for it. Oh, I'm my dog's favourite person. Oh, I like getting things off tall shelves for old ladies. They'll never figure it out until it's too late. Today was just the first step in my plan to take over the world. One kid's podcast at a time. First Greeking out, and then the world.
Thank you for listening. Next episode, we're taking a little field trip to a favorite destination.
Breaking out.
Gods and heroes, amazing feats. Listen and you'll see it's Freaking Out.
This episode of National Geographic Kids Greeking Out is written by Jillian Hughes and Kenny Curtis, and hosted by Kenny Curtis, with Tori Kerr as the Oracle of Wi-Fi. Stephen Carlile played a version of himself in this episode, and you can find him playing Hades in Disney's Hercules on stage at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane in London. Audio production and sound design by Scotty Beam, and our theme song was composed by Parry Gripp. Dr. Meredith Safran is our subject matter expert, Emily Gamin and Giovanna Alaimo are our producers, and Emily Everhart is our senior producer.